Yeah, and we're live. Steve, welcome back.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me, dude.
it's been quite a while.
It's been a minute.
When it's been a while. When last did we have a stream together?
I think you and I, the last stream that we did together was one of the atheist discussion points.
Ah,
Can science replace religion? I think it was.
yeah, and we need to get back to
Yeah.
those kinds of discussion again.
Well,
You and
you've
I,
been
we need to
busy. I've been
dwell.
busy.
Yeah, we busy, and the conversation here has been suffering, but hopefully, going forward in the next couple of weeks, I would have been able to settle down more and have more
Yeah.
conversations.
Well,
Yeah.
it's said
So,
that
Steve,
good friends should be able to pick up a conversation 6 months later and be fine.
sure,
I think
sure,
we'll be good. I think we'll be good.
yeah. You went camping this month.
Yeah. So I went camping from the 27th to the 7th of August. So the 27th of July to the 7th of August. Yeah.
And it was your wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
Was that part of the whole wedding anniversary celebration, or that just came as something else?
So what I usually do is my family usually goes up into Wyoming once a year, and it happens to be at that time. It's usually the first or the second week of August. And so we thought it would be a good idea and much easier for all of our families if we just made our wedding anniversary the same as as everybody else is getting together for um, our yearly family event. And so it made it a lot more easy for everybody to be able to attend the event, to attend our wedding. And so we just do our anniversary at the same time. And this year we weren't able to because of some weird things going on, but we did spend a lot of time together, and in the wilderness, and which means we're not in cell phone range. We're um, conserving water. We've got a limited amount of food. We have to be very careful about how much food we eat and stuff like that. And it's don't get me wrong, I'm bougie. So we have like a 32-foot camper trailer with like 3 slide outs. It's massive, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. And both me and my wife really love the forest and wilderness. And it was just a lot of fun. We like to go fishing and all that fun stuff. So it works
So,
out.
anything interesting happened during this trip?
It did.
Do you want to share with us what happened, Steve?
Well, I almost had to kill someone because someone kept trying to break into our trailer at 2 o'clock in the morning. So like the first night, someone tried to like physically open the door to our trailer, and 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, we're in a ravine with no moon, so you just can't see anything. And it didn't happen the next night, but it happened again the next night after that. So happened Wednesday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and eventually I say we as me and another fellow camper, we almost caught the guy, and he took off running. And he's lucky that he didn't get caught because both of us are really heavily armed. We both have AR-15s, and his is a 300 blackout suppressed, and mine's a bolt action SBR, and which are remarkably accurate, by the way. More accurate than most people give them credit for. But yeah, we ended up chasing the guy off about 300 yards out into the tree line, and heard him drive his truck off. So it was really sketchy. After that, we moved campsites to a different campsite.
Wow, what a way to have spent your wedding anniversary. And the thing that
Yeah.
the guy was so persistent, he kept coming day after day after day. I think he came about 4 times, and must have really had something sinister in his mind. And
Yeah.
well, we're glad that it didn't get any worse than that.
Yeah. I'm glad that I wish I could have caught the guy, but at the same time, it's probably better that I didn't.
Wow, that's good. On my side, today is actually my second year wedding anniversary. So my wife and I will be married for 2 years now today.
Nice,
So
congratulations, happy anniversary.
yeah, thank you, man. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But I said I have to do this conversation with you, so maybe we'll just do it within an hour so that we can go spend time with my wife and my kid.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
Steve, we're talking about your article. This was your very first article, if I remember correctly.
yes.
Stop culturally appropriating my white racist culture, please. That was the that was the title of it. Were you trying to be were you trying to be provocative, or what was going through your thought process when you came up with this title and when you came up with this article?
I'm a naturally funny guy. Like a lot of you guys online don't really see it, but I am a perpetual joker. Like I joke about stuff all the time. It's hard to get me to be serious sometimes because I have that kind of sense of humor where it's just I find everything almost everything really funny. Um, and I deal with difficult things in a humorous way. I mean, I actually did stand up a couple of times. I sucked really bad, but I did stand up a couple of times a couple of years ago, about a decade ago, and I was really good the first time, but the second time I bombed so bad I never went back. But my humor is very situational, and so you've got to. It's one of those things where you got to be there. But so a lot of this came out of my sense of humor and how I look at the world and how I view the world in very kind of cynical ways. But a lot of it was also birthed by a lot of the work that I had been doing with Dr. Mason and her theory of racelessness, and it opening my eyes to a different way of thinking about what we call race. And it just kind of it clicked in there and it made sense. I don't know how to describe it any better than that, but it was my thought was along the lines of if race was manufactured, and it was manufactured specifically to keep people segregated between inferiority and superiority and to justify slavery. And this was created by, I hate to say it this way, but most people will understand me when I say it this way, racist white Europeans. It seems odd to continue to do their work for them. Like, why are we paying these people's rent? And so it was a way of breaking out of the dichotomy between inferiority and superiority within quote unquote racial ideology. And being a funny person, that's kind of the way that I looked at it. Was it's supposed to be viewed from the outside looking in as a white supremacist, and how white supremacists have operated. And I'm talking about like KKK, Aryan Nation, stuff like that, and how they would view what we're doing to ourselves external from them. Because a lot of the things that they say about the races or about racialized black folk is what we're all doing to ourselves. We racialize everybody every day, and we racialize those of us who live within our own groups. So a lot of the times you'll hear, as an example, you'd be like, hey, why are you talking white? Or why are you dressing like you're black? You're not black. You're white, dude. Chill out. We had a term back in the 90s, and I'm sure it's still being used, being a wigger. So Wigger, right? It was kind of a play off the N word to denote that person is acting black. And it got me thinking about all the ways that we racialize people, even within our own phenotypical group. And it just got me thinking. And I started writing out something very, very different. My very first article was horrible. And I think I sent it to you or Dr. Mason or both of you. I know I sent it to Dr. Mason. I was just like, wow, this is horrible. I'm a smart guy. I should probably just learn how to write an essay. And so I went online and I learned how to write an essay for the most part. And so I rewrote the whole article in the format that you see it now, with a lot of tweaks, a lot of changes. Because I'm not a writer. I'm not an academic. I've never written an article in my life. And so this was really kind of this was definitely a labor of love to get my point across. Yeah, it was a genuinely, like, I am definitely looking to end racism, and this is one of the ways that I saw racism functioning, was intergroup racism.
So before we dive into this conversation, let me just bring it back to the point you made about comedy. You know this guy, the late Norm Macdonald. You know him, right? Yeah. I consider him to be like the best comedian ever, the greatest comedian ever, because, you know, when I listen to his comedy is so simple and it's so obvious, but it's so funny and it's so true. And he acts as if he's the stupidest guy in the room, but that guy is a genius with the way he crafts his comedy. He was a bloody genius. I so love his work so much. And he says something about his comedy that he actually likes it when he bumps on stage, that he likes it because if I listen to his comedy, he practices comedy like one who doesn't give a shit about whether you're laughing or not, whether you get the joke or not. It's like he's just enjoying himself. He's just telling his joke, and most of the time the audience is the butt of the joke. And if you're not smart enough, you don't know that you're being played. Like when he went on the View, and he was just messing with them, with all the women. They were frustrated. They didn't know what to do with him, whether to hate him, whether to love him. He was just messing with them, and they would try to goad him away from a certain point, and he would just stupidly bring them back to what he wanted them to talk about.
Yeah.
So Norm was a bloody genius, and it's really sad that it's out.
I agree with you 100%. Norm was definitely a genius, and I think that's something that you see, that level of compatibility with reality, but the kind of twisted way that they view it. You can see that also in Dave Chappelle, Norm Macdonald, any comedian that kind of looks at life and discriminates against the way that we don't make sense. The things that we do don't make sense, I think, is one of the best form of comedy. But also, Norm really didn't give a crap about being famous, which gave him an edge over other comedians who would maybe not use a particular joke because it was kind of on the edge, right? So when your livelihood is dependent upon your humor or your sense of humor, you have to self-police. And Norm clearly did not self-police very much of the time. So I think that the what I'm trying to say is that when your income is reliant upon what you do, you don't want to threaten what you do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But Norm just didn't care.
He absolutely didn't care, and his philosophy about life was so unique in the sense that he was talking about property. Like, he doesn't really give a shit about owning things. Like, what's he was even talking about sex, that sex is so repetitive, and so to him it's so boring. Like, this is something you do. His philosophy was out of this world, and I just love that guy. I mean his mind was brilliant. So I think you should have stuck with comedy. I mean, with your writing, you've obviously gotten better. So maybe if you had continued with the comedy, you would definitely have gotten better. If you have it in you, then you have it in you. Yeah. So now, in this your article, the first thing you wrote here was, "I am a white supremacist." Steve, are you trying to get yourself cancelled? Are you trying to get yourself are you trying to get hurt, or what? Why would you write that? Explain to me.
So there's two purposes behind why I wrote that. One was because if you admit to what your reader already thinks of you, they have no argument past that, right? They're like, oh, well, I mean, he's a racist, so I should not be surprised by the things he's writing, right? So it takes their focus off trying to hunt me down and more into what I'm trying to say. So it kind of removes that obstacle out of their way and puts them in a place where they don't have to concern themselves about who I am. They're just concerned about what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And then on top of that, that's where I put myself in the conversation, was outside of race in that way, where I could discriminate against all these things that were going on. And it was a liberating act from my position. So.
Yeah, and I think it served as a very useful hook. It served as a good hook because someone just admitting out flat out that you've got to be interested, even if you hate white supremacists, which obviously many people do, including myself. You've got to wonder, okay, so this guy is admitting to being a white supremacist. What has he got to say? And then the person starts reading and he sees something entirely different, and it's mocking, it's almost making ridicule of the idea of just looking at any random white person that you disagree with and say, oh, you're racist, you're a white supremacist, you're this, or even looking at black people or other people or people of color, a term that I hate so much but have to keep using to get the message across. Looking at them and them not sharing a certain ideology and just say, yeah, that person is a black person, is a white person in blackface or what have you. So have you ever been called a racist?
Not to my face. Not that I can think of, no.
Okay.
I've never acted in a way that I think would require someone to tell me that I'm a racist. Although I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people out there that haven't said it to my face that do believe it, but I mean, I don't care about their opinion. So,
I mean, people that you know who haven't said it to your face but do believe that you are one. Is that what you're saying?
So there's some that would have read that and been like, not liking me, but they can't really argue with what I said, because what I said was, as far as I've been able to ascertain, is mostly true. So it's not like I said anything untrue, but I also didn't do anything. If you read the article, I didn't actually say anything remotely racist, which is also another level of the onion of the article. But in my daily life, I know for a fact, because I've got some of my friends are followers of, the what do they call them? Dickendians, the Robin DiAngelos, and the followers of the Robin.
When you put it like that, it looks as if they are people from another planet. The Kendians from the planet called Kenda.
Yeah, I don't know, dude, because I think it's a ridiculous way of thinking about race. To get over race, we need to focus more on race, and to stop discriminating racially, we need to racially discriminate. It sounds like a like a children's book kind of a thought process. It just makes absolutely no damn sense.
Okay, now let me play devil's advocate a little bit and see if we can unpack this. Yes, we can say discrimination of any sort is a bad idea against any group of people. But if the gaps are so wide, if the systemic gap, the individual gaps are so wide, you understand, and obviously you want to get to a place where you have parity, you want to get to a place where the gaps are much more narrowed, and you know that naturally speaking it will take a whole lot of time. It might not even get to narrow, given the advantage that one group has over the other. So wouldn't it be a good thing to prop up the disadvantaged group in such a way that it pushes them forward, it propels them forward to at least try to meet up with the advantaged group? And this might require you to sort of discriminate against the advantaged group. You understand? But in the grander scheme of things, the goal at the end of the day is to achieve parity. The goal is to achieve some sort of equality in terms of wealth, in terms of whatever metric you're trying to. Okay. So maybe the idea the idea becomes much more sinister when we're putting it in terms of discrimination. We say, oh, we're discriminating, and that word becomes a bad word because we know the history of that word. We know what it done to one people previously. But do you think it can ever go to the same extent? The kind of discrimination that the Kendi and the likes of Kendi they are pushing for against white people, do you think it will ever get to the same extent as it was applied to people of color or to black people in the past?
Well, I will never support anything that is race-based, because the problem isn't that you're black or that you're white. The problem is something else going on that we need to identify. And what I mean by that is if we invite race into the conversation of positive discrimination, right? The obvious thing is, well, it's still discrimination. But the not so obvious thing is that we are reinforcing those concepts and constructs of race into the group again. So we're just kind of recycling and regurgitating the same, bullshit. And if we're going to be doing that, we're never going to solve the problem. Like, if it hasn't solved the problem in 500 years, I seriously doubt we're going to solve the problem in another 500 years using the same flawed construction of race.
Let me play devil's advocate again.
Well,
let me play devil's advocate again. Okay, you have a point. Finish your point.
Yeah. Sorry. So the other problem with that is when we look at that and we're looking for that parity, are we looking at equality of outcome? Or are we looking and searching for equality of opportunity? Because if we can look for equality of opportunity, that's substantive. That's substantive. Wow, I can't talk. Substantive, right? But if we're looking for equality of outcome, that would require such a barbaric manipulation of the system that I shudder to think what would be necessary to create that in real life.
Okay, so this is me playing devil's advocate again, and I'm telling you that, you know what, the rules of the game has already been set. The problem was created based on race, and the effects are manifesting themselves in a racially disparate manner, right? So why don't we also apply the solution we can't just apply a neutral solution, because at the end of the day, one group is disproportionately affected over the other group, and this problem was created on a racial basis. So why can't we look for a racially based solution as well, knowing fully well that no matter how bad we want to take it to, we can't take it as bad. You obviously cannot get a point where white people will be slaves in the US to black people, or be in chains, or being discriminated in terms of maybe like the Jim Crow laws and all that. You will never be able to get it to that point. So is this not some form of, benign, maybe just some sort of minor inconvenience that white people have to face, so that other groups can catch up and everybody can move ahead? Now, in terms of equality of opportunity and quality of outcome, me still playing the devil's advocate, I think that both goes together. The equality of opportunity and equality of outcome can go together. If you're already you're from a family which is wealthy in the first place, you have more opportunities naturally. You just have more opportunities in terms of the kind of schooling you go to, the kind of influences that you're exposed to, the kind of people that you hang out around with. You understand the kind of things that you're able to afford. That just sets from the outset. It means that you're not even starting with an equal footing in the first place. So when we're saying, equality of opportunity, the government cannot even guarantee equality of opportunity. Equality of opportunity most of the time, or opportunities most of the time, are on an individual basis. And if some families have greater resources, if some families have greater access, then you are going to see that this persists. So wouldn't it make sense for them to be a third party that comes in to adjudicate and say, you know what, let's try and bridge this gap so that, we can have other groups catch up and we'll just be happy ever after.
There's a lot there, Charles. First and foremost, I think a third party is the individual American, honestly. Because without actually changing the way that individual Americans think about these issues, we're never going to solve the problem, right? You can force us to do something, but we don't have to do it. You get what I'm saying? So really the change has to come from within the community, within society. And when you go back and you look at disparities, right, you can see a greater disparity past 1965 and the Equal Rights Act than you can before that. So we know that we had we had Black Wall Street. We had families were married. Actually, for a period of time, there were more racialized Black families who were married than white families. Marriage was an institution to help create, what's the word for it? A kind of wealth that can only come from when you have a team, when you work with a team, right? When you don't have to face every single problem on your own and you displace some of that stress, i.e. the family, you do better in every single metric, right? So we had lower unemployment in racialized Black neighborhoods. We had lower incarceration rates. We had lower poverty rates. We had lower almost everything pre-1965. And then something happened in the 1960s and all of that fell apart. And the 60s, 70s, and 80s were some of the worst times in our country for racialized Black folk because of the war on drugs. You could arguably say that it was targeted directly at racialized Black folk. Marijuana, there's still people incarcerated in states that have had marijuana illegal for years, but then they legalized it. Those people are still in jail for the thing that is now legalized. So it's any time I look at something, I'm not looking at the race. I'm looking at what the problem was that caused it. And so I think there's a lot of arguments for coming together as a community, staying together as a community and as a family unit. Also being able to, I'm a firm believer that not every disparity is caused by race. Some of those disparities can be caused by other things, but we have to have we should have an honest conversation about it. Right.
All right. So today I'm just going to be playing devil's advocate, Steve.
Okay.
And you have to convince me. Now, yes, I understand that not all disparities are caused by racism, but there are some disparities. A large amount of the historical disparity was caused by racism, and we have to address that. We can't say, okay, because some disparities are caused by broken families, some disparities are caused by by crime and all that, then we ignore the one that was caused by racism. Why don't we take a holistic approach? As much as we're trying to fix the families, as much as we're trying to reform the justice system, what about this disparity that was caused by racism? Now, if you look back at prior to the 1960s, when the Black family was doing very well, even at that time, though they were doing very well, the poverty rates were low and all that, but it was still nowhere near what white families were, the standards that white families were living at that time. So are we saying that it was acceptable for Black people to have that standard of living, even though it's a comparatively good standard of living? But when you want to measure it across, you want to measure it with respect to the white families at that time, it was nowhere near. So are we saying it was this level is okay for Black people, so let them be at that level? I think if I was alive at that time, my fight would be, you know what? Yes, we're living good, but we want to live just as good as you. And if there's anything in the system that is preventing that from happening, then we have to change it. And if there's anything in our history that has resulted in a way to why we're in this position, which I think there is, then we have to be able to address it. We can't just put our heads under the sand and say, you know what, you guys were oppressed for this long, now you're free, just go out there and make it, and you think it's easy, you just go out there and make it. No,
Mm.
people need some sort of support structures and all that. So this is
Yeah.
me playing devil's advocate. Steve,
Right.
what would be your response to that?
My response to that would be there's more disparity between me and Jeff Bezos than there is between me and you. Jeff Bezos is white, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
Right. So there's a greater disparity between he and I than you and I. And it has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with geolocation. It has everything to do with that location's economy, and other such issues. However, let's focus on I think what the meat of your question is when you look at the history of racism in the United States and you see redlining. Redlining is a perfect example. You can see that was a class-based system. It actually had very little to do with race and more to do with class. Excuse me. Because within redlined areas, you also had Irish, Chinese, all sorts of different racial groups, right? And so the effort was not to keep specific people down, but to keep a class of people down, a specific class of people, the undesirables, so to speak. But redlining was based off of the practice of putting racialized enslaved Americans in certain parts of the plantation that weren't good for plantation, right? And so they would put them in the worst part of the plantation because we're not making any money there anyway, so we'll just put them over there. They won't mind, right? And so, yeah, some of these disparities, absolutely, we can't ignore the fact that racism has happened and continues to happen. That's definitely that should definitely not be the answer to your question, because racism does continue. It does actually still continue and affect millions of people every day. I guess the part of the question that I'm not understanding is, what is your expectation of a result or an outcome? You'd have to explain to me why you as a racialized black man can't do what I can do. And I think the question breaks apart after that, because I know for a fact you can do more than I can. You're
No,
highly
you don't.
educated. You're a better writer than
Well,
me. You're a
where,
better
where,
speaker than me.
well, those are debatable, and even if they were true, they are not. They don't apply across every racialized black person or racialized white person. So
Yeah.
we can look at individual cases and try and draw a conclusion from them. But are they representative of what happened in the general population? I don't think so. So in that sense, now you're asking what exactly am I asking for? My simple request, based on what I'm doing here as playing the devil's advocate, is if we had a race-based problem, a problem that was created on a racial basis and has resulted in a racially disparate outcome, how much sense does it make for you to now use a neutral solution? Let us take the redlining, for example, and you will see an intersection between race and class. If I'm a smart racist person and I want to disenfranchise, I want to negatively impact the black people in a way, and I come up with this policy, I'll look at it. Well, I'm not going to couch it in the form of race, but I do know the people. If it's going to be social economics, I'm ready to sacrifice some of the whites just to further my goals. But I do know that most of the people at the lower socioeconomic level are black people. So if I implement a race-based program that would if I implement a class-based program that would disproportionately affect people of the lower class, then it's going to obviously affect people of a certain race more than people of another race. So in that way, I can wash off my hands and say, you know what, I'm not racist. You see, it's affecting that white guy as well. But we know what you were doing. We know why you did that. The reason you did that because you know more of the black people are going to suffer. And you being a shitty person in the first place, you're willing to sacrifice some of your own just to achieve your end goal.
Right. The problem comes when we have evidence, significant evidence, that race doesn't matter. So if you take people from the West Indies or other locations who are racialized as black, who came from slavery, and they come here, they absolutely kill it. They absolutely kill it, right? So they do better in school, they do better in testing, they do better as entrepreneurs, they pay more taxes. The list goes on and on and on and on. So is that a color thing, a race thing, or a culture thing, or an attitude thing?
Okay, now let me explain why this excuse will not, or why this thought will not work. You are treating all the black people as a monolith. Now, even
No, I'm
those who
not.
have no,
No.
what you just said now, even those from the West Indies, even though they had a history of slavery, their history is still certainly different from the history of African Americans in America. You understand?
Right.
And you have to understand the interplay of factors, especially from the cultural angle, especially from even from a trauma angle, also from what the media feeds. So all these things, they build into creating why different people have different cultures, and why they have different attitudes, and why what might be correct for what might be applicable for one group would not be applicable for another group. Okay, take Nigerians, for example. When Nigerians come to the US, they're very successful. They are hailed as
Yep.
successful blacks and all that. But Nigeria was also dealt a bad hand by the British, by the colonial masters, and which we are still suffering
Yeah.
today. You understand? But when we get to the US, we still thrive, right? Because there is a different history. Even if there was the history of suppression and all that, there is definitely a different history. So you have to take that into consideration. You have to take that into consideration and say what might be true for the West Indians, what
Yeah.
might be true for the Nigerians or for the Africans might not be true for the African Americans. Now we can't just fold our arms and say, you know what, see, other black groups are succeeding. So if you are not succeeding, it's your fault. You have to ask the critical questions. What exactly is going on here, and what can we do to remedy this situation?
Right. Well, that was my point of bringing that up, is that when we look at those groups who we traditionally behave as if they are a monolith, and we start to see the information and the data, we start to realize that no racialized group is a monolith, right? And so how can the rules apply evenly to all racialized black people if all racialized black people are not the same, right? They all have different interests. They come from different backgrounds, right? So basing a system off of something that doesn't even have common with everybody across the board would make no sense, right? It would be easier to say, okay, well, anybody who came from poverty and is still in poverty, let's give you a scholarship to a better school. Let's give you a scholarship to a private school or a better college, right? That would do more going based off of just poverty alone. Because if you're not in poverty, you're not part of the problem, right? You're successful. You're doing the things that you're supposed to be doing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if we base something so significant on such a loose set of definable terms, the outcome will never be equal. It will never function. It will never work. But you can take something like poverty and you can apply methodology to that. So that's my point.
Okay, good. You
Is
have a
that
good point there.
is that
Yeah,
okay?
you have. You do have a good point there. Oh, my light has gone. Oh, let me turn it on again. You do have a
Yeah.
good point there, because now, if we want to reason it from the angle I took it out in the first place, saying that a racist white person could look at
Yeah.
could look at class, could implement a policy on a class basis because he knows that it's disproportionately going to affect black people. So also
Mhm.
we can also implement a policy, a positive policy based on a class basis, and it's going to positively affect more people of this racial category. So that's a
Yeah.
way to go. That's a way to go.
So
I would say.
something about that, it piques a certain thought process for me, which is you can only make so much money off of someone who's poor, right? You can't squeeze a turnip and get blood. I think that's the old saying. So if I want to make more money off of you, let's say I'm racist towards racialized black people, and I want to keep them poor, it makes no sense to keep them poor because I'm not making money off of you. Like, the best way to take advantage of someone is to make them successful. More money to spend means more product to buy. That means I'm making more money as an entrepreneur. Let's say I'm selling widgets and the widgets cost $200 a piece. The people that are not going to buy it are going to be the people that don't have $200 to spare. So it would behoove me to improve the social lot of those beneath me so that they can afford the widget that I'm trying to sell them. Right. So it's kind of the same argument. If you look at the wealth gap between, or the income gap between men and women, and you just on the face, if you take their blanket aggregated statement, which is like 72 cents to the dollar of every man, well, why aren't we hiring all women and still paying them the same amount? We would decimate our competition if we only hired women at 72 cents per dollar. You get what I'm saying? It's like it makes no sense that we would discriminate and lose that much money. I'm going to take advantage of that discrimination. I'm going to hire all of them, and I'm going to be making a massive cost versus benefit analysis. And I'm going to say, okay, well, it's better for me to hire all women at a lesser rate, but we don't see that happening. Why do we not see that happening? Well, the best argument for that is when you equal out and you account for education level and children and marriage, the numbers match almost exactly, if not better, for women. As a matter of fact, a woman who doesn't have a child and who has never been married and has a college education actually ends up making more than men. So a lot of these things don't make sense. One of the things, like what I was describing earlier, is it makes no sense to keep people downtrodden and unsuccessful, because first of all, it just makes society just crappier. Two is it doesn't make you any richer to keep them poorer. So,
but you're making this argument as if most people are motivated only by financial gains. Some people are just motivated by pure evil.
yeah,
Take the Nazis,
some
for
people are
example.
just hateful. They're just hateful. Yeah.
Take the Nazis, for example. I was watching one of Jordan Peterson's videos years back when I was his big fan, and he was talking about just the incredible evil of the Nazis, that they could have used the Jewish prisoners of war, or the Jewish people. They could have used them as workers, as laborers to build, but they decided to just exterminate them. You understand? Obviously, it would be much more financially rewarding if they used them as workers, if they used them to, free labor and all that. But they were motivated by something else. So when you're looking at a racist, are you telling me that this racist is more motivated by financial gains? He's a racist after all. You're looking at a misogynist. He's a misogynist after all. So he can decide to forego the little change that might come from him, okay, taking advantage of the situation of this gender or the situation of this race, just based off of his animosity. He hates black people or he hates women. So that argument, the only way I see that argument working is, okay, if you want to take it, you want to scale it up to a large scale, how many people would be ready to, lose financial gain just so they spite someone that they don't like, or a group of people that they don't like. That's for today. For today, I think more people would be much more pragmatic, and even if you don't like black people, you still have to find a way to work with them if you think it will be in your financial interest. But if you want to go back to the past where it was ingrained, it was a legal and a social cultural thing. It was ingrained, and people wouldn't care. They wouldn't care having to pay more just so that they can not see a black face. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of a. I mean, you bring up a valid and perfectly good point. I quite frankly, I don't really. The best way that I can argue that is from a standpoint of time. So if we look at society generally gets more just over time. And what we see are people, especially, so I was raised Mormon. I live in a Mormon state, and we have a college here called BYU, which is Brigham Young University, and they have been traditionally exceptionally conservative to the point where they will excommunicate members for being gay, which I find atrocious. Now, there are people that go to BYU who are gay, who are trans, right? Because you can't discriminate. Legally, you can't discriminate against other folks, especially if you're taking federal money. But I'm not sure how all that works. But it's irrelevant. So what happened was a couple of students, and I mean a couple by hundreds and hundreds of students. There was a guy that came out in his valedictorian speech as gay at BYU, and it was not accepted well by the clergy, but the entire audience lost their shit in support. They were just really supportive. You could hear the video of the entire crowd just going and applauding and, you know, whistling and just being really happy for this guy. I have a tendency to believe that while racism does function and does exist, I believe we can eventually breed it out. We can breed it out in the form of raising our children better, to understand race better, to understand racial ideology better. We can teach them how to defeat racism in better, more effective ways. And also, part of the reason why I'm a skeptic eliminativist is you've heard of the trolley problem, right? So the trolley problem is where you have one person at the switch, and there's a train coming between two forks, and on the bottom fork you've got 5 people tied up on the rail. So if you pull the switch, you will send the train off of the 5 people, but into a ravine and kill everybody on board the train, or you can kill the 5 people and everybody on the train will be fine. Right. Well, the answer to that game, to that thought problem, is to not play the game in the first place. So when we look at the way that racism and racialization works in the United States and throughout the world, because this modern concept of race has spread throughout the entire world, so it's literally infected every aspect of human life. But when you cease to play the game, you open your eyes to a different way of living with your fellow man. And you can begin to help, you know, let's say that you were from a really racist country, right? Let's say you were from South Africa. Well, I might say, hey, Charles is trying to do something good. I'm going to pay him more money via his Patreon. Everybody, you know, pay Charles some money, huh? And I'm going to help you overcome your challenges down there, right? So we can work as third-party forces against racism. And so I think there's multiple different ways that we can work towards abolishing racism and hopefully race one day. And I think it's well worth having those difficult conversations and having great points like yours. And I don't know if I answered it, but that's kind of where I come at it.
Okay, now, so let me circle back to the point you made about the church and the gay this gay student who came out during his graduation ceremony. Now, I have a massive problem with that. Not the problem with him being gay, but the problem with him making that announcement doesn't make sense to me, because there is no value. It doesn't add anything to what is happening there at that point in time. This is a graduation ceremony. Why is it necessary for you to announce to us who you're sleeping with?
Yeah,
it wasn't necessary. So that was that. And you know that, okay, these people, this is a religious group, and this offends their sensibilities, you understand? So making something like that, it's a no-no. It doesn't make any sense. It's just as egregious as someone coming up to taking their graduation, giving their graduation speech and announcing they are black. It's an identity. It doesn't matter. You understand? So if we're trying to, you know what, dismantle the racial identity, and then we are propping up other identities. For example, if a guy goes up there in that same speech and the guy says, you know what, I am a fornicator, or I'm a this and I'm that, and he's announcing it to the people, I'm telling you, the clergy is going to have problems with them as well, because that is against their moral standards. You understand? So I think it was just being unnecessarily offensive. The reason I so much love Dr. Mason is that she doesn't say anything about her sexuality, because it's really not, it's really not prime to her. It's not, it's, she doesn't stamp it in your face. You understand? But when someone comes out and they want you to identify with their sexual preferences, I don't care. I don't care who you sleep with. Go sleep with anybody you want to. That's your business. I'm not coming out to tell you that. How do you know I'm straight? Did I tell you? Did I ever tell you that I'm straight or anything?
Yeah.
So I think people who do things like that and the crowd cheering them on, I don't think it's a good thing. Knowing very fully well that that's against the morals of the institution, number one, and number two, that it is totally irrelevant in the first place for you to make such an announcement.
So the reason why he did, and this is the part that I left out slightly on purpose, is that when we look at surface level problems, right, we fail to see what caused those problems in the first place. And BYU has had a history of ignoring complaints of sexual assault, rape, other different issues. They've had students at BYU who are gay are incredibly more likely to commit suicide, but because they say, you know, you are doing something evil or wrong, you're producing a problem that really should not exist, right? Because you can be gay and be a conservative. Like, I know that for a fact.
Steve, I don't buy that argument. I hear this, sorry for cutting you short, but I hear this argument a lot of the time that gay people are committing suicide, but more suicide, but nobody is telling me how that relates to them being discriminated against. Like the example I gave you earlier, that school, the clergy is going to frown against prostitution. They're going to frown against people just having sex anyhow. You know, they're going to frown against hookup culture. They're going to frown against so many other things that they consider morally bankrupt. That doesn't mean people who are committing fornication are going about killing themselves. So you've got to ask yourself, what exactly else is playing out here? Is it enough? Is it enough to just say, oh, what you're doing is wrong, and someone just say, oh, you say what I'm doing is wrong, I'm now going to kill myself? You understand? So I think it's more of an excuse to say, don't talk about these people. Don't, you know, if it's something that's morally reprehensible to me, I should be able to object to it. I'm not going to harm you. I'm not going to do anything towards you. You get it? It's just the same way as I would look at someone who has a wife and is cheating on his wife. The way I would look at him and tell him that, dude, what you're doing is wrong, is morally wrong. You understand? You shouldn't be doing that to your wife based on my Christian principles. Should that be enough to send that guy to kill himself? So I maybe you can give me a much more convincing argument, but I don't see how that would lead to gay people having more suicide rates.
It's not necessarily, how would you put this? I don't want to waste too much time on this because we got kind of off track, but when you've got someone who is a person of faith and they're of your faith and they follow the faith, they practice abstinence, they may be gay, but they practice abstinence, they don't sleep with, you know, a person of the same gender or whatnot, right? But you still discriminate against them in the form of being able to be excommunicated at any time or to be kicked out of the school at any time just based on your sexuality. That's a discrimination, right? Especially if you're playing by their rules and they say, okay, if you're going to do this, you have to practice abstinence. You can't have sexual relations on, you know, as long as you're a student here, and you're doing that. But then they're still telling you that you're a horrible, evil human being for having these thoughts and these feelings. It's not commensurate with the message of the religion, which is we love all, we honor all, we do not judge, right? God is the only judge. So there's multiple different aspects to this that go into the role of someone who is suffering from a religious guilt of being who they are and not being able to embrace both who they are as a human being who is gay, but also a person who is a human being and a person of faith. The two do not jive well within the Mormon religion, and they've not had really good PR lately. Like, to the point they will not allow your children, if you're gay and you have children, they will not allow them to be baptized. So I find that disgusting, personally.
Well, Steve, if you found an organization, right, there are going to be rules, right? There are going to be rules and regulations, and anyone who goes afoul of those rules and regulations, they are by effect. In fact, if you sign up to be part of an organization, you are by effect telling everyone that, you know what, you want to abide by the rules and regulations of this organization, right? Now, I don't think it's compulsory to be a Christian. I don't think it's compulsory to be a Mormon. But if you want to be either of that, then you have to be all in. You have to look at the rules and the regulations and say, is this something that I would be able to live with? Is this a way I would be able to live? And you can't now complain after looking at the terms and conditions and agreeing to it, and then after the fact start complaining that, you know what, this is unfair to me. Well, this is something.
They were born into it.
They were born into it. They can leave. They can simply stop being Mormon. They can simply stop being Christian.
Stop being Christian?
Well, really? if I thought today that Christianity, what Christianity is teaching goes against my core beliefs, and I see it doesn't make any sense to me, I could very well definitely stop being Christian. Yes, because there's no compulsion in it. Nobody's compelling me to be any of this. But
we will have to have a conversation about Mormonism sometimes, because that is a whole different conversation that would light you on fire.
Now, as a Christian, I will tell you that I can't be a Mormon, because I think there are some things, there's some things that are being taught in the Mormon faith that does not agree with me. You understand? Yeah. So definitely, in fact, there are many Christian churches I cannot even worship in. I can't attend because what they're teaching doesn't jive with what I believe the Bible says. You understand? So I have the choice. So, but in this instance, we're talking about, the moral stance of an organization, and the organization says these are our moral codes. Even in my church, of course, they have excommunication too. If you go against certain of these, certain of the set rules based on biblical principles, then you are in effect saying that you don't want to be a part of this organization. No one is going to harm you. We're just simply going to tell you that, you know what, since you have done this and you know this is against so you are in effect telling us that you don't want to be a part of us. You understand? It doesn't mean we cannot relate as human beings. It doesn't mean we can't, but as a member of this organization, no, this is not acceptable by us. So I on the religious ground, I think that is fine. But on a, day-to-day, outside the religious setting, then I don't think it makes any sense for you to impose such on anybody. You understand? Because in a secular basis, there's no one single authority that says everybody must behave this way. You get? So that is where I draw the distinction. Separation of church and state. There's a reason for us having separation of church and state. So you can't let the church should not interfere with secular affairs or interfere with state affairs, and the state should not interfere with the church's affairs as well. Let that distinction be there. That distinction should be there, and the church should not be penalized for keeping to its roots and its belief. Neither should the state be penalized for that as well. So, but we have gone so off topic. We have gone so off topic.
Let's bring it back. We'll have a conversation about Mormonism some other time.
Yeah,
But yeah,
definitely.
no, I think, in some ways, like from the original article, there was a lot of really fascinating aspects to it that when I go back and I read it, I'm still kind of surprised that I wrote it, um, because there's so much in there that is relevant to the conversation of race. Obviously, one in particular, it was where was it? It was oh yeah, it was a quote from Michael Eric Dyson, of the recently elected governor of Virginia, Winsome Sears, who's also a conservative. She's a Republican. And what he said was so racist that I couldn't believe that it came out of his mouth. He said, the problem here is they want white supremacy by ventriloquist effect. There is a black mouth moving, but a white idea running on the runway of the tongue of a figure who justifies and legitimizes white supremacy practices. I was just like, damn, that's racist. That is racist as hell. If a white person would have said that, they would have been skewered, right? But because it was a racialized black voice speaking, suddenly it was okay. Suddenly it was okay. Like, to me, an act of racism is an act of racism, regardless of who is saying it. It's fundamentally wrong to say something like that. And how rude, how despicable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, Ada, she said, I can never pronounce her name right. It's Ada. It's Ada. And she says, I've been told what I can and cannot do more by black people than I ever have white people. Right. And so I just started, like, all these things happen in a very short period of time. And I started to see a pattern within the behaviors. And that pattern was intragroup policing of perceived requirements to belong to that group. Right. Think of, if
Steve,
you don't know who you're
Steve,
voting for, you're not black.
your video is frozen. Are you using
Oh.
your video is frozen?
Can you hear me though?
Yeah, I can hear you clear and fine. I just wanted to point out to you. So, but you can go
Okay.
ahead with the problems.
Let me know if it gets better.
Still that way, but go ahead.
That's crazy. That's just crazy.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I think it was, there were just so many things in my my peripheral at that same time all together that just kind of set this pattern out for me to observe and to dissect. And it just seemed like the kind of conversations or the kind of statements being made, if you were not aware of who was saying them, you would say that they were incredibly racist. So we use this modern form of race that was created in the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, and we use that to harm people that we shouldn't be harming. People who, when you say you want to end racism, but you are continuing on with that form of racism using the same terminology, the same ideas, you're not ending anything. You're perpetuating it. You're building levels onto the master's house that Audre Lorde spoke about. And so I just wanted to highlight the discrepancies and the nonsensicalness of the logic being applied within these kind of circles. It made no sense to me.
Yeah. And an example that readily comes to mind, how the racism of the past is being perpetuated today by people, everyone, is this idea of the one drop rule.
Right.
I was having a chat with a guy in one of my videos, and I asked him, is there any legal requirement that says that the child of a mixed race person cannot identify as white? I mean, if you have one white parent and one black parent, is there any law? And he said no. So I then asked myself, so why do such kids default identify as black when you have a white parent and you have a black parent? why do you defaultly identify as black? I mean, you're not. Obviously, the reason why, historically, the reason why that classification happened is because the racists, they believe that for you to be white, you have to be of pure European heritage. But you can be black if you're mixed. You can be black if you are mixed up to an eighth or a 16th or whatever figure. Yet,
Yeah.
we're perpetuating that today. So in a way, since there are no legal requirements, why aren't people messing with messing with this idea of race? Why aren't people trying to destroy this idea of race by, I'm from a white father, I'm a black mother. Well, I'm going to tell you, even though I'm looking black, I'll tell you I'm white. What are you going to do about it? But
Right.
nobody wants to do that. Why?
Yeah. I don't know. I love that discussion that I can't remember where I saw you do it, but it was, I think it might have even just been a conversation between you and I don't remember, but we were talking about, or you were talking about, why is it mixed race children, it's cooler to be, it's cooler to identify with black than for white. And almost every mixed race individual generally claims, especially if they believe in the modern concepts of race, they will always claim black, right? Because you get far more social benefits from being black than you do from being white, right? You get access to scholarships, you get access to grants, loans, even entrepreneurial loans. You get greater access for. So I think that one drop rule, and Dr. Mason covers it really, really well in her book, which is Theory of Racelessness. You should read it. But she made a really good point that I'm actually going to quote it really quick because it's in my new article that should be being published here pretty soon. But she says, because I look as I do, I can say anything I want to you, mistreat you, cancel you, and yet not be a racist. In turn, if you look like me, you can cancel me and mistreat me because I do not conform to the box you create for yourself based on racism, and you cannot be racist. Our prevailing ideas about the naturalness of race and about the one-sidedness of racism are incoherent. Make it make sense. And that, I think, is one of the kind of guiding principles here that I used in my article, was looking at the way that we perceive race and having to attribute stereotypical behaviors to that race is a form of chaining that person to that race itself. You're policing that person's behavior, their thoughts, their actions, their beliefs according to something that does not biologically exist. You know what I mean? And so it was the level of harm that we create using race is one of the worst concepts ever delivered to humankind. It's just an atrocious, murderous, villainous idea that should be killed. It should be squashed. It should be destroyed and never used again.
Yeah. There was this other point I was going to make. Yeah. So another racist term, I think, that is still being perpetuated today, that was started by racists of old, is this term people of color. I mean, it stems from the word colored or colored people.
Yeah.
You get, and it was used to distinguish the Europeans or the white race from every other people. And people still use it today, people of color, as though those who are classified as people of color have anything in common other than not being white. And what that does is essentializing race and making white seem like there is white and there are others. So in essence, you are putting white at a pedestal when you say there is white and then there are people of color. People of color can be Japanese, they can be Chinese, they can be African, they can be Indians, they can be whatever. But white has to stand out. And we don't see a problem with that. We don't see how that is, that is glorifying whiteness, or how that is making white look or seem unique. it's crazy that in this time and this age, things like that people can easily pick up and say, you know what, this doesn't make sense. But everyone is participating in this game, and everyone is just perpetuating. In fact, you can look at those racist white guys of old. If they come, if they're alive today, they'll be like, you know what, our investments are paying really off, really,
Yeah.
really well off, and nobody's even saying it's bad anymore. Everybody's taking it as
Yeah.
the norm.
Well, I think I actually covered that in my article, but something Chloe Valdery has also covered this as well. But the way that certain people elevate whiteness is almost to an omnipotent level, where it's ever present, ever being everywhere, and it's like I agree with her. I don't see how or why we should elevate this concept of whiteness so high, because that's the thing that people like Robin DiAngelo do when they're talking about, your whiteness, is they are actually elevating whiteness above everything else, thereby codifying white supremacy. Like, this is what they are doing. They are giving credibility to the thing that they say should not be given credibility. Like, they don't even understand their own damn words. And it's ridiculous that these people are being published. I mean, it's ridiculous enough that I'm being published, but it's even more ridiculous that those people are being published, because they speak out their ass. It makes no sense. The logic behind it doesn't make any sense. And so, for me, I listen and I read, and I'm smart because I didn't pay for this book, in the sense that she made no money off of me. I bought it used from a bookstore. So I'm not giving her my money, but you have to be aware of what your opponent is saying, and you need to know their argument better than they. And we've covered Ibram Kendi on my channel a little bit, and it's the same kind of construct. We continuously see them elevating white skin above everybody else, but never actually addressing the problem that whiteness should be gone just as much as blackness should be gone. Like, these constructs are not useful to us as human beings.
Yeah, and they, when I first read Robin DiAngelo's book, I was just laughing. There was this section about the experiment that she conducted, or she quoted an experiment that, oh, even white babies are racist too. I was like, really, seriously, white babies are racist? It was so ridiculous. I mean, I was like, what is wrong with this woman?
It's so gross.
So gross. She just grosses me out. Once I see Robin DiAngelo, she just grosses me out with the way she speaks, and like, come on, chill the hell out. Just chill the hell out with this.
Such banal confidence that you're just like, look, you arrogant person, sit down, because you're completely wrong.
Yeah.
Just just, I mean, and the thing is that book really is, how many pages is that? 250 books, or 200 pages? Basically it's a 200-page love letter to her own racism. Like, if you read that, she's talking about when she went into a school and she was talking to a principal, and she was like amazed that he was black and all this other stuff. I'm like, lady, that's racist.
So you're surprised. You're surprised to see a black man who's a principal. So what were you thinking black people were doing at this age?
Right. No, yeah. She's like, oh, I thought you were supposed to be oppressed. I'm so amazed that you're here. You're supposed to be oppressed. It's like, oh man, lady.
It just shows the level of disconnect that these people have. Either they're so disconnected from reality, or they're playing a fool, or I don't know.
Well, this goes back to what we were talking about comedians. Like, if your income is so reliant on creating division, there's no better market than race. Period. And that's what her business is. That's what Kendi's business is. Right? And so that's something that I really love about Dr. Mason, is like, if she's right, which I believe she is, and if she's effective, she's going to be out of a job eventually. And I love that because that shows the level of honesty and integrity required to do this work. Like eventually one day I'm going to have to stop writing about race. You know what I mean? And I love the fact that she can do that with her theory of racelessness. And that's what I think is also the most brilliant aspect about it, is because when people come at her and be like, hey, you're just trying to make $1, be like, yeah, but at the same time, my dollar is going to run out.
Exactly.
Kendi and D'Angelo will not ever run out as long as people are following their crappy ideas. And to me, if someone is risking something, if they are risking their paycheck because they want to do something that's right, I will, more often than not, will side with them before anybody else. Before anybody else.
True. So we should talk about Dr. Mason's book. I have a copy, as Dr. Mason sent me a soft copy of it. So I haven't gotten past the first 2 chapters because I'm very busy. But I'll make out time to read the whole book so that we discuss it in depth and also talk to her about it as well. I'm sure there are very, very useful ideas about a theory of restlessness that's found in that book. But anyhow, Steve, I'd like us to round up in the next 5 minutes or thereabouts, so that I can go take some rest for today. So
spend some time with your wife and child.
Yeah. So if you're just coming in, please like the stream, share this stream, comment on this stream. You can support the stream with super chats and super stickers. You can, subscribe to this channel. You can support us on Patreon and all that. We're just trying to have honest conversations where we question everything. Like today, I was playing the devil's advocate with Steve and, trying to just beat him hard on certain points, and it was a good, fruitful conversation. Because I don't want a situation where we're just looking at things from one angle and we're not considering that there might be merit on the other side. More often than not, both sides have a kernel of truth, but it's covered with the massive layer of nonsense and people's own feelings and opinions and their own agendas. So if you can just strip away all those other agendas, then people can look at each other and say, okay, so what's really going on here? Let's have a conversation. Okay, you have a problem, you have a challenge. How do we deal with it? Rather than just saying, no, rather than just demonizing the other side or just saying the other side is a fraud. So today our conversation was about Steve's article talking about stop culturally appropriating my white racist culture. And we've seen how many of the racist things which were instituted by racists in the past are being perpetuated by people today who would not consider themselves to be racist, including Black people, or in quotes, people of color. And I have to say again, a term that I hate so much, people of color, but I keep using it. I just hope there is a day where I don't have to use that term, people of color, anymore, because it so irks me. So Steve, any further thoughts on this before we call it quits for today?
Yeah, there was the very last part that we were talking about. Especially with Kendi and D'Angelo, and I'm gonna read one more section from my article, from the article that we're talking about, and the listeners and watchers will be able to understand where this connects. I say, hell, we white supremacists don't even have anything to do anymore. They're doing it all on their own, bringing back segregation, silencing voices, suppressing ideas, all the while putting so much value on my white skin, which I suppose I shouldn't mind, but somehow I do. I have to say thank goodness, because it seemed like all the racialized Black folk and other minorities were starting to catch up to us white folk. Now I don't have to worry. I truly never thought I'd see a day where they'd be doing my work for me. What a time to be alive. And that was kind of my way of kicking those people in the nuts and informing them that the thing that they say they're fighting against, which is equality and destroying discrimination based on race, you're not doing it. You're not doing the work. You're actually doing the opposite. You are reinforcing the thing that you say that you're fighting against, because you're using the same constructs to discriminate against people who look like you, right? It is the most unintellectual and most dishonest, I would say the most intellectually dishonest way of operating yourself around race. Because we know that differences between people are not race-based. They're generally class, culture, or location-based, right? There's more difference between you and I based on geographic location, right, than there is between you being a man and me being a man. Like we have more similarities along the lines of similarities that we do have. First of all, I love talking to you all the time. Like every time we get to talk, I just absolutely love it because we have so much fun.
Yeah,
but
we do.
You're really intelligent, and you really push people. You have a great way of being confrontational, but not rude confrontational, right? You'd like bringing up the devil's advocate and really pushing people on their ideas and their beliefs. And I love the fact that you do that to me, and I really appreciate it. And I would hope that you never stop doing that. But also, I really want people to think about race in a different way. And even if you consider yourself to believe in the modern idea of race, I would ask you to take a moment and to think about the ways that it doesn't work for you. And consider perhaps maybe abandoning it and saying, you know what, it's not going to work anymore. It hasn't worked. It never has worked, except for the fact that if it was intended to enslave and kill and murder, it did a great job of that, right? But it has never served as a form of liberation. Never has, not once ever, because you'd still be caught in the same cyclical form of hate. It's just as simple as that. I don't know how to better put it than that. But thank you for having me on today, Charles. I was really hoping to talk to you again, and this was great because this article that I'm writing now is more of a clinical look at racelining, and it's been proposed and accepted by the Journal of Free Black Thought to be published probably later this month. So I'm really excited about that.
Wow, I'm excited about that too. I can't wait to read that article in Journal of Free Black Thought.
I'm excited and scared as hell.
You don't need to be scared, Steve. I know your work. Your work will be good. So on that note, we're bringing the stream to an end, and I want to say a very big thank you to all those who tuned in today. Those of you who left your comments, and those who liked the stream and has supported in whatever way, we really, really appreciate. Would like you to come around whenever we're having other conversations. Hopefully next week, Friday, Chloe is going to come back with our bi-weekly conversation, and we'll talk about something interesting as well. So with that being said, I will catch you guys in another live stream, and it's bye for now. Bye, Steve.
See you later, Charles.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.